I love the entrance music. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for braving the single digit temperatures and the single digit time of day to join us today for this panel. You are at Beyond the Bow, always on brand. And we will be talking about branding, of course, but on a macro scale. And then we'll also delve into some smaller topics like our origin stories and what Yep, we sure will. We're going to get right into it. But also, what is visual storytelling and where can you take it? What is a brand? And how do you get there? How do you get from being yourself to being a brand that an audience can consume or buy tickets for? My name is Titilayo Ayangade, and we are going to have a great time here. I'm a cellist and photographer. Um, my career and brand has been multifaceted. As a cellist, I've been a quartet cellist, I've played in ensembles, I love new music, and I also want to thank Sphinx for being there for me this whole time, all the way back when I was at SPA a long time ago, and up into touring with Virtuosi last year and getting a Empower grant to commission none other than Curtis Stewart himself. And exactly, I know, right? Shout out to that. And as a photographer, and all the images you'll see here except for Kori's are my own, I take pictures of some of the best, most exciting, and wonderful people in our community. Musicians that we all know and love that are on the stage here with us today, and that you'll see around the conference. And my goal through that is to help them look more like themselves than ever. You're probably like, what does that mean? Like, yes, these people look like themselves, but they're expressing something. I like to think that I go beyond just a headshot and look for the true essence of people. And when you're in studio with me, we get vulnerable. I'm gonna ask you questions like, why this music? Who are you? Like, I want people to send me their music beforehand so I can get to know them because I'm trying to capture them so people can see them, really see who they are, not who they think they should be or who their teacher told them should be or how their hair looks that day. Today, we have on stage with us Curtis Stewart, Josh Henderson, and Kori Coleman. We're going to jump right in and move over to Curtis here. So, Curtis, we met a couple years ago, and I think the very first thing we did together was I took your photos.
Yeah.
Which was kind of the reverse of what I do with most people. I'll often like play with them or play their music and then I'll take their photos, but we just jumped right into that. But now I've played a lot of your music.
Did we do
photos first?
Before alarm will sound?
I think so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I just remember seeing your photos with with Talia.
Yeah.
Quartet and just been like, you can just see. I saw the quartet, but I also saw, I was like, that must be coming from. I didn't know that you were a photographer, actually.
Oh.
But somehow from the photos, I just sensed that. It's like, oh, she must be the one. And I just feel like you capture something that you do exactly what you're saying you do, which is really cool. I think a lot of people don't really know what the quality of their impact is. They don't know how other people see them. And I think with that skill, that you have that skill for yourself. And I think that's something that you share with everyone that comes into your studio, and you make them feel very comfortable, but also vulnerable at the same time. And I think it's just amazing. You're the vision of of Black classical music right now, and I think that's pretty cool.
Thank you. Thanks, Curtis. I mean, community, that's what it's all about. Building community, networking adjacently, and just building something with everyone because we're all going to be here for a long time. Curtis, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and anything you want anyone to know about your brand?
Ooh.
Or just yourself?
I'm a violinist composer. I've actually been working on. I was hearing what you said about what the way we think people should see us, and I think that is the space I like to live in and question and subvert. Some of the photos that I have are me. not this one, but are me in like a tux and like staring off in the distance, like very typical like soloist type photos. And the point is that there is a facade of what a classical violinist could look like. And I like you, and then you hear the music, and you're like, wait, is this classical music? And that is exactly that is my brand. Like that, this questioning of the boxes and the dehumanization that usually goes on when we buy and sell art. So I try to, in our piece, I always kind of come from some type of folk element, or most of the time. So in our piece, for example, I wrote a viola cello duo for Duo Kayo, and it's based abstractly on the music of Gail Scott Heron's "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised," which is hot button. People all know the title, but they don't actually know the lyrics. And we were talking about we started from your experience of being new in New York, and how do you give back to the community that you just moved into? So that led us to a conversation about gentrification, and therefore and also the sense of like how when an area becomes historic, it also becomes hot, like a place for people to go, and therefore the history ends up changing. And so is it better for an area to remain invisible, or is it better for an area to remain threatening so that people don't gentrify it? And therefore, is it worth the threat of state violence to maintain your identity? And so those are all the questions. So like I have them like going to make TV sounds, and like the radio dial is changing, and so it's all kind of tapped into that. Anyway, I'm taking a really long time. Sorry, guys.
That's totally fine. I appreciate everything you're saying, and I think we have more to touch on this idea of how to be yourself, and like, is it better to be yourself or be invisible or be a version of yourself so that you can protect yourself? But I'm going to go ahead and have Josh introduce himself. Josh is one of the most authentic people I know. He's amazing violinist and bassist, and I don't know how many instruments you play, but it's pretty awesome. And his band Warp Trio just dropped their album, Songs of the Matriarch. So go give it a listen if you haven't. Josh, share some of yourself with us, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thank you for the plug, and thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm Josh. I live in New York. Play mainly violin and stuff. I like to do a lot of contemporary music and also some old music and everything here and there and in between. And just I feel like I'm just a lover of life and art and stuff. in the short. Yeah.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, up next is Kori Coleman, who I've gotten to know from afar, and I'm so happy to be on stage with you in person because she's absolutely wonderful, y'all. She runs Decompose, that's her baby. If you don't know Decompose, which I'm sure you do, again, please go give them a listen. If you live in Chicago, attend one of their programs. But Kori, share with us maybe how you got connected with Decompose as a not currently practicing musician.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So I like to always kind of point out the obvious with people. What's interesting about Decompose is I'm the only non-practicing musician of the group. Long ago, I played violin and oboe, but I consider myself retired, even though I didn't play long enough to be like good at it. But I found myself just like not seeing myself really fitting in classical music or not fitting in with the pathways that were kind of shown to me. So eventually I did leave, but fast forward to me as an adult, I started to become a content creator where I was covering events and activities in Chicago, just really wanting to showcase another side. Because one of the things that annoys me is when people hear Chicago and they immediately just think about all the violence in the city. So I wanted to highlight all the beautiful events in our artistic and creative scene that is happening there. So one day I saw an event that was highlighting the music of Black composers, and this whole light bulb moment went off. So even though I had played violin and oboe, I had never had a teacher introduce me to the music of Black composers. And I realized in that moment, I'm probably not the only one that feels that way at all. So I was like, wow, it'd be great to start a chamber music series that highlights specifically Black musicians and Black composers. And the key thing to kind of call out here is I didn't have a music community. I didn't know anyone. So I just Googled Black musicians in Chicago, and I came across the phenomenal Yelly Taylor, and I sent Yelly a cold email. And I was like, I would like to start a chamber music series in Chicago. Can you help me? And Yelly was incredibly instrumental in reaching out to the Black musician community. And only a few people responded because the budget was very small. And those people that responded were Caitlin Edwards, Kyle Dixon, Yelly Taylor, and Tahira Whittington. And those were the founding members of Decompose. And we came together really just creating an image of what we wanted classical music to look and feel like, but at the center of it, everything being very Black. So when we're talking about the idea of branding and how we show up, everything that I touch is a celebration of Black culture, Black joy. Decompose, we create spaces for healing and that joy to exist. And yeah, that's a little bit of how we got started. But I think at the core, I really love Black people and I love being Black. And you see that in everything that I do. So
Yes, give it up for Kori. Thank you for introducing yourselves. So before I jump into some more questions, I have a graphic up here on the screen, and we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. There's also, if you go into the app, there's a space to submit questions as we go, or thoughts. I also invite, if anyone has any particular aspects of their own brand that they might have a question, go ahead and drop it in the app, but you'll also have a chance to speak live if you would like. So behind me, and also to the left there, we have building your brand from within. Where does a brand start? I truly think it begins with yourself, right? We all are ourselves, but what I find is that we all grow up to sort of try not to be ourselves, and that's heartbreaking. We're trying to be something else. We're trying to be what we've been told to be. And I find when you skip that first step of identifying the many facets of yourself, you can't have a brand that actually has authenticity, trust, believability, or anything. It might work for a while, but there will come a point where you'll have to sort of reckon with that and dial it back and find out who the core of yourself is. And that can be earth-shattering, life-changing even. So if you start with yourself and then you move to your core identity, that could be anything. As a musician, it could be that you love performing the music of Black people. It could be that you love community engagement. It could be that you just love color and loud music. You know, these things are all important for your brand. It's not just being the best cellist, the best violinist, the best brand strategist. There's more to it. And then once you move through that, you can start to see how you could visually and emotionally express yourself. I'm coming at this from a visual standpoint because I'm a photographer, but I would love to hear everyone else's opinions about it from other standpoints, including maybe written expression as well. And then you give the audience something that they can pick up and look at. They can read your articles, they can look at your pictures. This is all before they even meet you. And you're in total control of this, whether you believe it or not. And I think everyone should remember to lean into that. And then after you move past all of that, you have your brand. Now, see, if you subtract one thing from this, like if you subtract self from it and you start with audience perception, all you're worried about is the audience and what they're thinking about you, and that's not a place we want to be. Musicians, I'm sure, we're familiar with being on stage and all you're thinking about is the last wrong note that you played and how you hope that no one heard it. But we don't want that to carry over into our visual expression either, because there are no mistakes. Use your photos. Use your identity for good. So I wanted to open it up to the three of you, and I wanted to hear your version of what a brand is. I just gave you what I thought, but I want to know from your standpoint, like what's something either key to you, your brand, that makes you, or from a brand that you really admire? Anybody?
I could go. When I think about a brand, I think of it in terms of like the whole picture of all the ways that someone can connect with you. So that connection could be online, on your social media. It could be through words with how you talk about yourself, or it could be as simply something as like just having an interaction with someone when you're first meeting them for the first time. So I think of the brand as the full totality of how you want to show your true and authentic self across any type of medium or discipline. I don't think a brand has any limitations, but it's all about how you want others to connect with you and perceive you. So that's my initial gut reaction of a brand.
I love that. I'm really curious about your thoughts on brands that are bigger than just one person, because I think we're all musicians and we sit here by ourselves, but you have a lot of experience with ensembles and also larger brands that are companies.
In terms of
Oh, like how, so if you think that there's things that apply to both, or would one be easier? Are there things that individual musicians could borrow from larger ensembles or groups?
I would say the biggest thing that I think every brand, even whether you're an individual or a group, it's important to recognize that it's not happening by just one person. In order to really kind of build this totality type of identity, it requires multiple minds and perspectives to have that type of input. So even as an individual musician, I think it's important to think about your community and who you want to connect with and see how that can influence your brand. But also from an organization standpoint, they're thinking about all the different people who could potentially impact who they're reaching and connecting with. So I think it's important to kind of like look outside of yourself and think about who you could bring into that conversation when building a brand.
I was thinking about that as you were talking about the first thing of self, because I wear, like, I have the reason my hair is so big is because I have so many hats on right now. I'm a composer, I'm a violinist, I play in PUBLIQuartet, a string quartet, improvising new music string quartet, and I'm also the artistic director of the American Composers Orchestra and professor at the Juilliard School. So those are some of the hats. And so as an individual, I feel like I can get in touch with myself, ask myself questions, and come up with an image. What do I like? What do I want to subvert? How do I relate to the image, and what feels like it's resonating with me specifically? With quartet, we have to kind of find, it's, everybody, we do the mood chart, the mood board, where we all throw images and we start to find that Venn diagram, because in a group of 4, it's important that all of us are at a 10 all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like when we make choices, if someone's kind of lukewarm and another person's lukewarm, another person's kind of low, cold, and then one person is super hot, that is not going to be sustainable. So we all have to be at either growing hot or all like burning hot on an idea to really feel like it sparks us. So for example, on our last album, What is American, we had a picture of us. So we did all these improvisations on Dvorak's American Quartet and commissioned Vijay Iyer and Roscoe Mitchell, all these American composers, to Rhiannon Giddens to comment on the concept of what is American. And so the first image we had was us in front of the Brooklyn Bridge with like the little American flag waving back up here. And it just wasn't like sitting right. We were all at a 5 on that image. And then our label was also more like at a 3. And so we were like, we need to figure this out. And so they proposed an image which was a blank white page with a tear and Benjamin Franklin's face behind it. Looked like it was on money. And we were like, I love this image, the structure of this, but why Ben Franklin? And so then we put Harriet Tubman back there.
Yeah.
And on the money, because there was that whole conversation about whether she should be on the $20 bill. And then the lettering of the What is American was like the money font. So then suddenly it became very meaningful. And so it was a process of experimentation. Like we all threw stuff in, didn't work, redo, la la la. So that was the process of finding. I guess that was a couple of those. But
yeah, you went
the
through
point.
process.
But the thing is with quartet is we've been together for 10 years, so we know who we are. So then if I go to, sorry, I'm talking a long time again.
No, please keep talking. This is
I'm
so
almost done.
insightful.
So done, almost so
Take
done.
your
So with
space.
American Composers Orchestra, who are we? We've been around for like going on 50 years, or more, 79. So, and the people that are running the organization now are very different than the people that began it in 1979. And I think a lot of the work we're doing now subverts the work that we did before. So how do we brand ourselves? Can we accept that? Am I allowed to say that on this stage? Am I going to be
Yes.
fired tomorrow? I don't
No.
know. Probably not. But so like, how do we brand ourselves in a way that reflects on our past, and how are we okay with that, and realizing that maybe there was some harm that was done, and realizing that the work we're doing now may cause some harm in the future as well? And is that all part of our brand? Are we allowed to be authentic as an institution? And so it caused all kinds of conversations in our within, and luckily we have an amazing CEO, Melissa Nahn, who allows for us to all voice our dissent. And so we came up with something, but she is the one that kind of led the way. So in other words, like, you can, in a situation where this institution becomes larger, it seems like everybody, maybe the voices are all heard, but there is some group that needs to be the decision maker. Otherwise, it's very amorphous, and you'll get something that's very corporate looking, because nobody has an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing the opinion of nobody.
Can I jump in with
Yes.
Chris is saying, which I think is a super important thing. I think it is like authentic, and it is like real to like change as like people and as organizations, whether you're like a big organization like the ACO, or like even like a duo or a quartet or whatever. I think it's necessary. So I think we shouldn't like shy away from having that be like an authentic and honest part of like our brand. Like, even if it's like on a project basis, like, we can have some kind of image, and then time changes and things happen, hopefully for the better. We'll see, as we move throughout time. But I think that's a reality, and I think something to like embrace, and you can confront that very, very upfront in your own works and stuff like that.
I love both of your answers, and I have some questions for you. So either anyone can answer this, but I'm hearing you say, Curtis, that you had this help from your quartet, from each member giving you their reading of it, like 10, 5, not feeling it, feeling it, the management suggesting something, and all these things happening. What about someone who doesn't have that community, or thinks that they don't have that community, and they're just using what they see as like a barometer of what they should want? I get people all the time that come in and they're like, "Oh, I saw that you did this, just do that for me." And then I ask them, "Well, what does that mean to you? Does that work for you?" Because it can. I mean, I'm not going to not take the photos for you, but I want it to go deeper. I feel like with social media these days, we just get into seeing the same thing, and then we all want to be that same thing. It's like, are you doing what so-and-so is doing? Do you look like what so-and-so does? Do you play like that? So how do you shake that, especially if you don't, like, maybe from your individual standpoint, not even from an ensemble standpoint?
I think one needs to really just, I feel there's so much like we're a lot of us are musicians here, but even beyond that, there's so much like music and like art and like content. I hate using that word, but like cinema and stuff like that. And at this point, there's a million bajillion songs on Spotify, and there's so many like kind of shitty movies that come out that are like, why is this even here? So I think people need to look inside like first and be like, why am I even doing this? Mm-hmm. Like, is there even a reason for me to like create this thing? Like, which is, I mean, most people who are doing stuff, I think there is, and you need to like find that. If the reason is like just to do it, or just because like, I don't know, Sally over there is doing it, so I want to do it too, then that's, there's no really point. And I think people pick up on that. Mm-hmm. Like if there's like so much just like, like I said, there's, we see the big studios release like films just because, to see if they can make like a quick buck, and like then they flop and they're like, oh well, that flopped, I don't know what happened, we spent a bunch of money, and I'm just like, what's the point? But then when someone makes like they really makes a big a really wonderful piece of art that's like original and like comes from the heart, and they really thought about it, and they put everything into it, then that like tends to succeed. So I think looking internally and being like, is this for real? Do I really want to do this? And then I think those questions will your brand or whatever will evolve, and it'll become apparent. You won't have to look or search too hard, I feel, if it's authentic.
Finding your why. Go ahead, Kori.
Yeah, I want to build on that too, because I think, to your point, like really asking yourself, why do you want to do this, is so critical and important. But I think it's also, you really need to spend time on that red bubble, a significant amount of time really asking yourself the hard questions that you probably haven't sat down and asked yourself. So not only why do I want to do this, but like, what do I even care about? What do I like? What is something that brings me joy and I want more of? What is something that is painful and I want less of? And all of that kind of becomes your compass that ultimately determines how you're going to make decisions. So with Decompose, I'll ask the group after, when we have performances, I'm like, okay, what did we like about that? And that lets me know, like, okay, we want more opportunities and collaborations that are like that. And then it's like, okay, what do we not like about that? And that lets me know, like, okay, we don't want to work with this type of individual, or we don't want to be in these type of spaces. And really sitting with yourself and paying attention to those emotions that come up and using that ultimately to guide you. But I think really sitting with yourself and asking yourself those tough questions is the only way you could kind of get to your brand and finding your desired audience. So
Absolutely. And Kori, we spoke the other day, and I was fascinated by Kori's answer to this question, which was, has Decomposed ever felt pushback from anyone for what they're doing, or like requests to throw a little Dvorak on the programming of this amazing all-black ensemble? And maybe you could share your answer, and then I'd be curious to hear from.
yeah. So the short answer to that is no. We've received very little to no pushback, and that's because when people are reaching out and wanting to collaborate with the work of Decompose, they know you are working with an all-black ensemble, and we say we exclusively perform the music of Black composers. So because we have that in our values and that's our compass, it lets us know these are the type of opportunities that we want. And while we have those kind of guideposts for ourselves, we also have those same kind of guideposts for our partners. I won't work with someone that hasn't previously engaged with Black artists or isn't involved in their community. And that ensures that everything is not only on brand, but just also aligns with our values. So yeah, we haven't received pushback to date. I don't see it becoming a problem in the future. And I think it's because we have an identity and a vision and a purpose that we're able to stand firm to, but also we have a freedom to be able to walk away with something that's not aligned, and to trust that our people will find us, and it's okay to turn down something if it means compromising our values in any way.
I think that's an important point. It's okay to turn things down. It feels scary to turn things down, right? Like, I always get a cold sweat anytime I'm saying no to something because it doesn't align, or like my schedule just doesn't work, because you're afraid of what people are going to think about you. But I think it's time to maybe shift the perspective to being more afraid about people not knowing the real you. We live our lives in like anticipation of waiting for someone to make a decision about us, but it's so empowering to just make the decision yourself. And as you were saying, Curtis, like, it's okay to or maybe Josh was saying this, it's okay to change over the years. It's okay for that brand to pivot, to shift, to change. Yeah. Curtis, I would be curious to hear from you.
Oh my God, we get pushback all the time. I get pushback in every because I feel like I think what I'm doing is pushing back already. And so is what all of us are doing, but I think anyway. So like, yeah. So quartet land, yeah. Can we put some Dvorak on the program? Is definitely what we've heard, and so we've been playing this Dvorak improvised. What is American quartet? We basically peel back the Czech language and we build on those themes of the Native American folk songs and the Negro spirituals that kind of permeate the work, and we just see where those folk musics went, like in terms of the blues, jazz, R&B, la la la, and we find them on our string instruments as a string quartet. And so then the presenters get a brand name composer on their program. And we've been playing that for since 2017. we were in residence at the Met, Metropolitan Museum of Art, and had this big, and it felt very meaningful then. It still feels meaningful now because we can have conversations about what it means to be American and what is American as a statement versus what is American, the question mark. And now it feels more poignant than ever. So maybe we just had a good idea, but we've been playing the same piece for 7 years. And then so sometimes we just don't want to play that piece. And then we're like, well, why wouldn't you want to listen to Pulitzer Prize winning Henry Threadgill? And why wouldn't you want to listen to Fode de Lasana, the amazing balafone virtuoso that can play 4-part harmony with two mallets on a tiny, like, 2-octave balafone? Like, why is this brand name? It starts to make me really question not so much the presenter, but the audiences, unfortunately, because I'm like, why wouldn't you come? Why? And so I think that is what would spark the next project. That's what sparks our next projects. Those whys of questioning, like, why is this the way it is? That causes us to, like, again, challenge that why. And as an individual, I actually take it upon myself to bend and hopefully not break myself. So I'm a composer, so I can always just write something for myself. I'm an improviser, so I can but I also end up recomposing the works of, Samuel Coleridge Taylor and Chevalier de Saint Georges and so that I can be feeling like I'm playing my music and also lifting up their names at the same time. And so that's my way of dealing with that pushback. For example, right now I caved and I'm learning Bernstein's Serenade. And I was just talking to Josh about this. I'm like really wrestling with it. I'm like, Bernstein was an amazing composer. This music, if I didn't know who he was, I would love it. And I know who he is and I still love it and I love him. And Bernstein was on the front lines of civil rights. He raised money for a lot of stuff. He had quite a bit of impact. But how many black composers did Leonard Bernstein commission? His music is deeply influenced by the blues, jazz, and American musics. How many of those? He went down to the Village Vanguard and heard Art Tatum. He went down to hear Charlie Parker. Why is there not a Charlie Parker saxophone concerto? So I get really mad. I'm like learning this piece, and now I have to play it. Now I'm getting paid to play it. I'm like, it starts to make, it's like this thing that I end up questioning myself, and hopefully that's my why towards myself, and hopefully that turns into the next project as well.
That's really deep, because what you're basically saying is you're being so tapped in with your why is actually making your life harder in a way, because you're not striving for the authenticity, but it's so native to you now that you're just seeing it everywhere. And when something doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. And then you have to grapple with that. And maybe that, like you said, results in the next project. Josh, I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
So when we worked on our photo shoot that you all saw a couple slides ago, I feel like you had such a specific concept going into that. You had your album that you were releasing or your project, and I listened to the music and it was really amazing. And then you just told me this concept. You wanted this idea of a party, but like for the deceased. And I don't know, you had such a strong concept that it made it so easy and so fun. Our shoot was at 7 a.m. Ooh. Yeah, and I wouldn't say yes to that typically, but Josh, we knew that it was going to be okay. I knew what we were doing. I knew you before you were there.
That's why I was wearing sunglasses.
Yeah.
Actually, Josh is like my Sally. I saw those images. I was like, I just want to be like Josh.
So, Josh, maybe you could share maybe what went into that, if anything, or if it was you being tapped into your authenticity.
Totally. Well, I think, as you said earlier, I think we're all in the business of storytelling, and we need to, I love what Jesse said last night about hating calling this like the industry, but that is what we do. We show up and we need people to come to concerts, and we need to like sell ourselves, and we need to let people know like what they're gonna see or hear when they come out to stuff. and not necessarily just like, oh, I'm gonna hear like Beethoven, but like I'm gonna try and connect with this particular emotion or like vibe or feeling on some level. I feel like every kind of like advertisement or like kind of brand thing that's out there is trying to show this in order to, you know, be like, so for people to be like, oh, I wanna experience this type of thing tonight or whatever. So I'm gonna attend it and like commune with other people who are also trying to experience this vibe from the thing. So in that particular photo shoot, that was a very the album was a very specific project made in residence at University of Iowa, which is a really, really great place. And it was about like a very specific event, like the day the music died, where like Richie Valens and the Big Bopper and Buddy Holly and their pilot died, which is a very specific thing. However, it's a very you know, even though it's a singular event, I feel there's so many things that are universal, like this feeling of like loss and like grief and like death and a lot of other issues that are in that I dealt with in that project, some like race stuff and like whitewashing and all these things that can come from a thing, from a project, but so I want to convey that in the photos, which are used for, you know, for the tours and like the marketing and stuff like that, in some kind of way. So this idea of like the tour they were on was the Winter Dance Party. So I was like, you know, just I'm like you know, some brilliant like director or something like that, but I was like, okay, let's like think of like basic color schemes, like it's a sad thing, blue. It's like a party, but you know, there's the folks involved died at the end. It's very sad. So like, can we have like a, you know, just a singular person? You know, the detritus of like a sad party. There's like streamers and stuff on the floor, and you know, it's like heavenly, because it deals with, you know, passing into that next like kind of realm. So there's like floating guitars and shit like you guys see. But all these things, and I'm not saying like I nailed it, but I think we want to. I
think you nailed it.
But we all want to. I think we want to think about these things, like what is like the vibe of this project, whether it's like an album or like a show or like even just like a person. Like if I see like Curtis's picture, and I'm just like in Maryland, and I'm on the street, and I see, oh, this guy's gonna play this piece, and like I see his thing, I'm like, oh wow, that guy looks like that's a cool guy. I wanna, I'm taking in like the vibe, like the story, and whatever that can mean for you. And it's like, I wanna experience, you know, whatever art this guy's like putting out, because like this story that's like on the brand, on the picture or whatever that's being put out there is interesting, and it seems like something that I can like really get down with, or whatever, you know, space I'm in. So I think, you know, in a nutshell, we just want to think about the story we want to tell, and how can we do that as like succinctly, as like directly, and be honest about what the thing is, like, you know, that we're trying to put out there in the world.
Can I?
Yes.
So I'm just thinking about, if you saw like okay, so for the presenters out there, you run a classic, you know, a main, quote unquote, main stage series, and this is one of the images that you're going to use for your main stage series. What does that say about what you think classical music is? I see whoops, Q&A time, got it.
Well,
I think about that a lot when, like, for example, when you say, like, if someone's in Maryland, they see my picture, it's, I think, a picture of me with like a kind of leather jacket. I'm probably wearing something like this, and I'm like holding the violin like that. And so a lot of people assume that I will be improvising. A lot of people assume that I will be playing jazz. They assume that maybe I'll be staying in first position for the whole concert. And I guess that's I think of the idea of using images to challenge people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can be doing that and be a virtuoso. That's a virtuoso right there. That's excellence. And how do we frame that with the banner of the, you know, whatever symphony orchestra that you're? How do we frame Black excellence and not force the artist to code switch?
Yeah. I think this is a perfect segue into our Q&A, leaving off on this thought of what are we? What next? And I'm excited to hear everyone's questions. Remember, there's also the box, so go ahead and drop them in there. But let's go ahead and get started on the Q&A.
I'm going to start with one of our online questions, but if you could just keep your hand raised, I'll make my way around to everybody. But the first question is, what are some of the ways your own brands have evolved and changed over the years? How have you navigated and explained or validated that change to others?
Anyone want to take that first one?
I could start.
Yeah.
I would say, like, thinking about the very beginning of Decompose, we've always thought about the audience. So just to let you know who our audience is we're primarily reaching people who have not listened to classical music or don't have exposure to chamber music. So we really are kind of reaching outwards within that. So we started out with our traditional concert, but the brand started to evolve once we saw the needs of our community. So from that, we were able to build a music and meditation series because we see that our communities need spaces to process themselves as well as their feelings. We started to see parents coming to our shows. So we were like, okay, let's create family programming. And we saw the two-year-olds had a particularly hard time with our concert. So we created a story time series for them. And then we saw poets coming to our shows and wanted to create a space for them. So we've allowed ourselves to evolve and grow based on how many people we're introducing in our community and all the different stories that we're interacting with. And I feel like we're still evolving and growing. I think what's exciting about the current era of Decompose is we're always meeting new artists, always meeting collaborators. So the sky is kind of the limit to where we could go based on the stories that we want to tell and the people that we want to meet. And it kind of evolves with what's needed in that time and what society needs in that moment, but it's not meant to be a fixed and static thing. And I think that's an important thing to think about with building your brand too, is knowing that it doesn't have to remain constant. Leave room for an idea to grow and develop instead of feeling like it has to be complete and final when you share yourself with the world. It's okay to put out an unfinished product and continue building on it until it's where you want it to be.
It really is okay to put out an unfinished thing. Sometimes better to just be done than to be perfect. I think we have another question. Go ahead.
Hey, I just had a question about any kind of advice that you have for a collection of people who are probably at the beginning stages of finding this identity and self that you talked about. I know maybe many of us here have maybe the stems of an idea of what it is that they want to see change, but getting it to be something that is as easily identifiable as something that Decompose has been able to do. It seems to be a challenge. So any kind of insight of how you hone that with other people when it's like a collective sense?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. I can speak to this from my experience in my former quartet and also undergoing personnel changes, different types of branding, doing our photos, doing them differently for different things. So I think it's important to talk about it a lot. I mean, that's the name of the game. Get everyone in a room, really brainstorm though. Everything goes at first. You can't shoot down anyone's ideas. Like, you just have to try everything. And then I would say, take it to your community. Is there a venue you can play in to test out something? Just test it out. It may not go well. It probably will, but it may not, and that's okay too. But you can use your community to give you that feedback and also to feel supported before you put yourself in front of the whole world of people who haven't met you and would like to have an opinion about you. Use your community to build that sense of trust and authenticity, and then they can also help support you when you go outwards too, and maybe even give you feedback. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just trying stuff out, and I think that's so awesome what you said about doing it in your community. Like, you see, especially I'm in New York, so you see it's hard to start a group there, and I know you're in Minneapolis, that's a big city, but you see groups that start in smaller places and can try things out, like this group playing contemporaneous and start in Bar College and a very small group of people and can really experiment stuff. I think just not being afraid to let's do this, let's try this. And if you have an environment where you can truly try things out and see what spaghetti sticks to the wall and what doesn't. And I think you have to do that a lot to really hone things. Like the big groups you see, they feel they all did a bunch of stuff and like tried out stuff and are still trying out stuff and seeing what works, and have some kind of support where it's like, oh, we can do this and maybe it won't work out this time, but so we can craft and go back to the drawing board and figure it out. But yeah.
I would add too, don't be afraid to ask for feedback. I think sometimes we might be afraid to hear some criticism or what someone could think, but I want to share like some examples from Decompose, what we've done. But I remember in the early stages when we launched, we asked people like, well, what is Decompose to you? And I'll be honest, when I got some of the responses, I was like, oh, that's not what it is. And that let me know that what we were putting out there isn't exactly how we wanted to be perceived. So we started adapting kind of based on that feedback. And I remember another instance where I was kind of called in instead of out. I would say, yeah, we perform on the south side of Chicago pretty frequently. And someone from the south side was like, I've never seen you on the south side. And I'm like, you know what? Bet we're not that consistent. So we had to get more consistent because of that feedback in order to actually be true to it. So I think sometimes you could have your own intention of how you think you're being perceived and what you want to do, but it's important to make sure that what you're actually putting out there isn't aligned with the people who are actually experiencing you. So don't be afraid to get that feedback and say, hey, this is actually my goal, but am I hitting on that? So yeah, hopefully that helps.
Awesome. Okay, maybe next question.
Hi. The question that I was really wondering was how do you really incorporate yourself, your core identity, and your expression in such a way where it really reaches like young audiences and people who may have never heard classical music might think it's boring, it's European, it's this, that, and the other, like closed-minded people essentially?
That's a tough question that has a lot of layers.
Why do you want to reach those people?
Yeah, that's a good starting place.
Well, the thing is, what I really want to do is help diversify the classical music space as far as audiences, performers, music, just everything. And I feel like sometimes even like within my own family, there are people where it's like, oh yeah, that's a God-given talent, that's cool. But if I'm like, oh yeah, I'll play some like Mozart or Beethoven, it's not really all that well received, to be completely honest. And I guess it's like, I know it's great music. I know everyone in here also knows it's great music. But I guess selling that to people who might think, psh, because like I feel like everyone likes classical music, but not everyone knows that they like it. And I guess I want to figure out how to make people realize that they do actually like this.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm excited to talk about this, as you can see. One of the things that I think helps in terms of reaching audiences that may not be as familiar or don't know they like it, they'll know once they come see it, is really putting that music in context. But I think it's also important to remember that your audience, they may not listen to classical music, but they might go to a gallery or they like movies. And I think it's about finding ways to connect with people that are already a part of worlds that they're a part of. So think about just what are people doing in their day-to-day and figure out how do you bring classical music to them instead of saying that you have to come to us and find it. And I think meeting our communities where they are in terms of the spaces that you occupy, but also the interest that they have, is the best way to build those audiences. Something that I'm proud of is the Decompose audience. We've put on so many people to classical music. Like they'll say before a Decompose show, they weren't listening to classical music, but because we were that entry point, they now are listening, and it's pretty cool and dope to be able to do that. So think about like who it is that you want to reach and what they care about, and seeing how could you bring your worlds together instead of thinking it has to be this separate thing. So I hope that helps.
That's a great answer, Kori. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Kimberly Knox, and I am my company, Ubiquitous Public Art, and also recently American Composers Orchestra with the illustrious Curtis Stewart. I wanted to ask really a question around brand evolution. My original brand, we were very visually driven at a time that no one was doing that. So that became, the face of it. And like, I'm sorry, Kori, I'm sorry, Karina? Kori, I'm so sorry. Like Kori, it's the same type of thing in which it was a DJ-based band, like brand, and the nightlife brand. And in that, I was an artistic director. So I created everything, but I put other people there. So when the brand evolves and you're no longer working with those people, how do you acknowledge everything that you built with those people and evolve it into what you're doing now with new people? Do you see what I mean? Without disrespecting the legacy of what is very valuable. It's foundational, So, and how do you do that visually? Because I love a photo shoot. Like, that is my thing. And it's important because it shows the growth and the legacy of what you've been able to accomplish and the ways you've been able to grow. And you want to put all of those people's faces up there, and they deserve that. But in that, is it wrong to, like, do you invite the other people? You know what I mean? Like, I struggle with it all the time, because it's not to say that it's not bad blood. It's just, it took a long time to evolve it. So is it going backwards to include them in any, anniversaries, things like that? You know what I mean? So I'll take anybody's thoughts.
So just so I'm totally understanding, you're saying that the former members are not still in the ensemble, but you're wondering how to honor the legacy of having them in the ensemble?
From a branding perspective, if you're going to do, let's say, a 25th anniversary thing, you would want to acknowledge who was already there too. So I'm just wondering, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's like, how institutional do you want to be? And like, do you want to be like, yes, 25 years, boom, we got this, and look at where we've gone, look at this trajectory so that you know where we're going. And so you're actually seeing, it's like proof in the pudding in the image, maybe. There was one image that we did with PUBLIQuartet. It was just a random photo. We had, so Jessie Montgomery was original member of PUBLIQuartet, so she was, was she there? She may not have been there, but my mom was a musician. My dad is a musician. Janina, the other violinist, her dad is a musician. Her husband is a musician. Like, we had all of our families there, and there was this picture. We're all in our fly outfits and like in front of a artwork or something, and there's all this gold and red everywhere. And that wasn't a branded image. We're not like using that, but that felt exactly right. Meaning, this is the crew. This is the squad. And I think if there are people who represent where you're going that have come from your past, I think it, for me, 100% makes sense to include them in the imaging.
Yeah, I think it would be not nice to exclude them, but like Curtis was saying, it depends on what you're trying to show, like a legacy image or reinventing something new. You can still nod to that, but I wouldn't be afraid about losing it. The images live out there for a long time. And so if you do a new thing, that doesn't supplant what came before. It's just additional. But it also could be nice to make a concentrated effort to put them all together. Just depends on what message you're wanting to send. Yeah. Next question.
Hi, my name is Damali. Wearer of many hats, like many of you and most of the people in this room, I'm sure. But I primarily work as a conductor and a composer. I am curious, this came up actually as Kori was speaking about Decomposed and your journey. When you have kind of asked yourself these hard questions and you are starting to get a strong sense of your brand, your audience, and the work you want to do, how do you now begin the process of building that when there is no set path and your current network isn't set up for this new brand that you're wanting to develop, specifically as an individual? Thank you. Please, anyone, I'll take your feedback.
I'll give a little bit of input. I recently moved to New York about 2.5 years ago, and I felt like I had no sense of community, because you know people, but you don't know them, and they don't really know that you exist because there's a lot of people there. And I mean, I think you just have to have patience and get to know yourself. So I say patience because one day it will feel like you have that community if you start looking for it today. But if you don't start at all, even just sending a DM to someone, asking someone a question, inviting someone to your concert. I love going to people's concerts. That's the easiest way to meet people and build a community. But if you don't start today, it won't happen by itself. And so patience with aligned action, I think, is key. Anyone else have anything to say?
Yeah, I would add to get comfortable talking to strangers. I feel like that's a big thing. I mean, that's how I got started, but I think feeling comfortable just reaching out to people, even with no expectation of anything happening, and just being like, I think you're cool, we should meet, and starting the conversation that way, and just giving yourself that space to get to know people on like a person-to-person level versus, hey, can you help me out and do this thing? So I think just reaching out to people that you actually admire and like and say, hey, I think you're cool. We should just get to know each other and start like that. A lot of our collaborations started with just like that. Like, hey, I like you, you like me. Let's see where this goes one day, but no pressure either way.
Some of the best things start that way.
Yeah.
Really, use the rest of the conference to just walk up to people and be like, hey, I really like your vibe, your energy. I'm curious about this thing that I saw you do. Like, I just want to talk to you,
I find it a lot easier. Like, for example, yesterday I performed with Jesse, and suddenly I've been very vulnerable in front of most of the people here, and I also feel seen by them. So, like, presenting myself, doing that, saying that you like somebody and you really like their work is that, like, this sharing of vulnerability. And in that way, I actually feel more available to talk to people I don't know, because there's something I'm like. It's like a fight or flight response, because you've shared this vulnerability. It's also kind of dangerous because sometimes you just really don't know what they're going to say. So you have to learn how to deal with the BS that people say too. But yeah.
Like I should ask you, how do you deal with the BS that people say?
Ooh.
Yeah. We have time for one more question. One in the front.
Hi, everyone. My name's Chris. I have a question here. My question is, as your brand grows and achieves, so too does your confidence, right? So how do you balance or keep in check your ego? That is to ask, how do you react to when people around you take things the wrong way or even feel hurt by your confidence, success, or your energy? Can you speak to confidence versus ego?
I think what Curtis was saying, just a quick note about it, vulnerability, making sure to include vulnerability in the equation. As you grow your brand and you gain confidence, perhaps you have to keep pushing your boundaries, keep pushing your edges, keep looking for something, keep looking for a way to bring in more community. And that will keep you vulnerable, like kind of off, not totally like rooted in your opinion, so that you can stay open to other people's opinion.
I'll say this really quickly, but I think before you're even successful, you have to decide what your definition of success is. I think a lot of us, we didn't necessarily start it for the accolades and to get big. So in those moments, you want to connect to why you got started in the first place. And those moments will really humble you in a way. So I think it is important to have that humility, but remember why you're even doing this in the first place. And it's not just about the high accolades. Like, that's a nice cherry on top, but that's not necessarily your why. So hopefully that's helpful.
All right, I think we are done. I have a little thing here if anyone wants to scan this QR code. It's like a sample photo form. If you're wanting to work through any ideas, concepts, visual stuff, feel free to respond. You'll get your responses right back to you in email form, and I won't do anything with it, but if you want. Thank you all for being here. This was really amazing. I love your energy. Thanks for the great questions and engagement. And thanks to everyone on stage. Woo!